I used a classic cheat to beat my competition, though at the time it didn't feel like cheating. It felt like survival. It felt like the only path left open to me when every other door was slammed shut in my face. Looking back, I can see how the edges blur between cleverness and dishonesty, between grit and deceit, but in that moment the choice came quickly, and once I stepped across the line, there was no turning back. It began during the regional business contest, the one that every ambitious student and young entrepreneur talked about for months in advance. Winning it meant more than just a trophy. It meant recognition, opportunities, investors with deep pockets and sharper eyes, invitations to conferences where ideas turned into careers. It meant stepping onto a ladder that could climb high, fast, and forever. I had entered with my project, an idea that I believed was solid but maybe not groundbreaking, a system for streamlining logistics for small local vendors. It was practical, useful, but not dazzling. I knew that. The others, my competitors, were dazzling. They had polished slides, clever branding, even taglines that stuck in the mind like jingles. They dressed in sleek suits, spoke with the poise of television anchors, and wielded connections I could only dream of. I watched them during the preliminary rounds, dazzling the judges with not just ideas, but spectacle. I couldn't match that. My resources were thin. My presentation skills were raw. My confidence was cracked from months of rejection letters and closed doors. But I noticed something. In their shine and polish, in their hunger to impress, they all leaned heavily on numbers. Market share, projected growth, graphs arcing upwards into dreamlike futures. Numbers spoken fast, splashed on screens, dropped like jewels for the judges to admire. And numbers I realized could be bent. Not falsified entirely. That would be too obvious, too reckless, but framed differently, emphasized strategically, omitted when inconvenient. That was the classic cheat. Not a lie, not outright fabrication, but the careful arrangement of truth until it looked more powerful than it was. I didn't invent the cheat. I had seen politicians do it, advertisers thrive on it, even professors tilt statistics to serve their narratives. I simply borrowed it, shaped it to fit my own desperate need. The night before the final presentation, I sat in my tiny apartment, reworking my slides until dawn. I found the numbers that looked best for me. The rising trend of e-commerce in small towns, the expansion of delivery services, the overlooked percentage of independent shopkeepers hungry for affordable logistics solutions. I inflated nothing, but I stripped away the parts that made my idea look modest. I exaggerated the shadows of opportunity and left out the doubts that kept me awake at night. I polished the edges until the system that felt practical in reality looked, on screen, like the missing key to an entire industry. When the morning came, I dressed not in a suit but in the best shirt I owned, and I stood before the judges with a calmness that surprised me. My voice didn't tremble. My slides gleamed. I spoke not of what I feared but of what I wanted them to see, and they leaned forward in their seats, nodding, scribbling notes. I watched my competitors, one by one, deliver their dazzling shows, but for the first time, I wasn't intimidated. Their graphs rose high, but mine rose higher. Their markets were big, but mine looked untouched, ripe, inevitable. When the results were announced, I heard my name echo across the hall. First place. Applause roared, and cameras flashed, and for a moment, I stood taller than I had ever stood before. I shook hands, smiled for photographs, collected a trophy that felt heavier than its weight. I had done it. I had beaten them all. But the truth lingered beneath the surface. The cheat had worked. The judges hadn't seen the missing numbers, the questions I hadn't answered, the cracks I had carefully covered with bright colors. I had tilted the scales. I had played their game with their own trick, and I had won. In the weeks that followed, opportunities poured in. Investors called. Articles praised me. Invitations arrived on crisp paper with embossed logos. I rode the wave, all the while holding tight to the secret of what I had done. Each handshake felt both earned and stolen. Each compliment both sweet and bitter. Was it really cheating? I still ask myself that. I hadn't lied. I hadn't invented data. I had simply framed the truth, sharpened it, weaponized it. Some would call that strategy. Others would call it deception. But whichever word fits, it changed everything for me. In the months after the victory, the glow of success clung to me like a second skin. I walked into rooms I never thought I'd enter, sat at tables where conversations shaped futures, and signed deals that pushed my name into newspapers and business journals. The project, once a modest sketch in my notebook, became the centerpiece of meetings with investors who promised resources, staff, and reach I had never imagined. At first, I convinced myself I had earned it. Hadn't I worked late nights, sacrificed weekends, poured myself into building something real? Wasn't the system itself practical, even necessary? What did it matter that I had tilted the truth to climb higher? After all, everyone tilted. The world itself seemed built on polished half-truths, ads that made junk look like treasure, speeches that promised what could never be delivered, contracts that hid more than they revealed. I had only done what they all did. But reality, unlike numbers on a slide, cannot be arranged so neatly. The first cracks showed when the investors wanted results. Fast, visible, undeniable. They wanted the projections I had shown to them, not the slower, more stubborn growth that was the real pace of my system. They leaned on me, pressed harder with each passing week, their eyes narrowing whenever reports came in below expectations. I scrambled to keep up. I hired quickly, promised too much, stretched the company thin, all while telling myself it was temporary, that soon reality would catch up with the picture I had painted. But reality lagged. Competitors I had beaten at the contest began to surface again, slower perhaps, but steadier. They built patiently, tested carefully, grew without the pressure of outsized promises. They looked at me with a mixture of envy and suspicion, as if they knew how I had vaulted ahead. Some even whispered about me at conferences, their voices carrying just enough for me to hear. Too good to be true, numbers don't add up. Watch, it will collapse. And collapse it nearly did. One of the investors, sharper than the rest, asked for the full datasets behind my projections. I froze. I had never falsified the data, but I had left out the parts that didn't shine. I delayed, sent partial files, dressed them up with commentary to steer attention. For a while it worked, but cracks don't stay hidden forever. The day came when one of the partners, a tall man with eyes like glass, slid the papers back across the table toward me. "You presented something different," he said quietly, not accusing, not angry, just cold. The weight of his gaze pinned me harder than any courtroom could have. "You gave us the future, not the truth." I didn't answer. I couldn't. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the victory replaying in my mind like a film I couldn't stop. The applause, the trophy, the headlines, all of it, born not of a lie, but of a cheat, a tilt, a bending of the light until it looked brighter than it was. And for the first time, I wondered if winning had been worth the price of forever carrying that secret. But here's the twist. The cheat did not destroy me. Not entirely. Some investors left, but others stayed. They stayed because the system, at its core, still worked. Slower, smaller, less dazzling, but real. And so I built again. This time on steady ground, brick by brick, no shortcuts. I watched my growth crawl where it once sprinted, but I also felt something I hadn't in months. Relief. Relief that I no longer had to pretend. Yet the memory of that contest still follows me. Sometimes I'm introduced on panels as the young entrepreneur who beat the odds, and I smile, nod, play the part. They don't know the full story. They don't know that the odds weren't beaten, only bent. And sometimes, late at night, I ask myself the same question I did when I first crossed that line. If the world rewards the cheat as much as the truth, then what kind of fool is the one who stays honest? I don't know the answer. Maybe I never will. But I know this much. The day I chose the classic cheat, I gained more than a victory. I gained a shadow that has never left me. The shadow followed me everywhere. Even when things began to stabilize, when the company found its rhythm and the chaos of rapid growth slowed into a sustainable pace, I could feel it, like a thin film over every accomplishment. Every article that praised my success, every handshake from a partner, every nod of respect from someone I once envied, it all carried that hidden weight. I wondered, Did they admire me, or the illusion I had created? Was I being applauded for the system I had built, or for the picture I had painted that day when I used the cheat? Months turned into a year, and the contest that had lifted me up became a memory others spoke of more than I did. That was the turning point, they would say, the moment everything changed. They weren't wrong. It had been a turning point, but not the kind they imagined. It wasn't the beginning of a straight climb upward. It was the fork in the road, where I chose the path paved with shortcuts, and now every step carried echoes of that choice. I began to see the cheat reflected back at me and others. At conferences, young entrepreneurs pitched their projects with the same polish I had once envied. Their slides glowed with statistics that seemed too clean, too sharp. I recognized the trick. The framing, the omissions, the exaggerations whispered between lines. And I couldn't help but wonder, had I inspired them? Had my victory encouraged a generation of competitors to bend their truths the same way? The thought made my stomach twist. One night, after a particularly long day of meetings, I found myself walking the empty streets of the city. Neon signs flickered above shuttered shops, their promises of sale and best in town glowing into the silence. Lies, I thought. Cheats small and common, embedded into daily life. The world was built on them, wasn't it? And if that was true, then maybe I had only played by the rules of the real game, the unspoken one. But then I remembered the faces of those I had competed against, the ones with real ideas, maybe not polished but honest. The ones who had lost because I had tilted the scale. I remembered their silence when my name was announced, the way some of them clapped with tight smiles. Where were they now? Some had vanished. A few had struggled forward quietly. I wondered if I had stolen more than just a trophy that day. Had I stolen their chance? Their belief in fairness? The question began to gnaw at me. It came to a breaking point during another competition, this time where I was invited as a judge. The roles were reversed now. I was the one listening, watching, holding the power to decide. Young faces stood before me, trembling, determined, hungry. They pitched their projects, and I could see it so clearly, the honesty in some, the cheats in others. I could tell who had polished their truth into something shinier, who had stripped away the flaws to blind us with brilliance. And sitting there, pen in hand, I felt the full weight of my past choice crush down on me. Because I knew, without doubt, that if I judged them fairly, if I rewarded only honesty, the cheats might still win. They always had an edge. And yet, if I rewarded them, I would only be feeding the same cycle I had once started. That night, after the judging was over, I sat alone in the hotel room staring at the trophy the winner would receive. My reflections stared back at me in its polished surface. For the first time, I asked myself not just whether my cheat had been right or wrong, but what kind of legacy it had left behind. Did I want to be remembered as someone who showed the world that bending the truth was the fastest way forward? Or as someone who learned, too late, that the shortcuts always carve scars that never fade? I still don't have the answer. The world continues to reward cheats, small and large. I still carry my own victory, heavy with questions. I still wake sometimes to the sound of applause echoing in my mind, sharp and hollow. I used a classic cheat to beat my competition, yes. But in the end, I wonder if the real competition wasn't against them at all, if it was against myself, against the part of me that wanted to believe that honesty could still matter in a world so eager for illusions. And the truth is, I'm not sure which side of me won.